me, my name is Mrs. Lauren Lemon Hoffman, and I teach ninth grade American History and Government here at the high school. Upon becoming a member of this high school faculty 6 years ago, I knew I wanted to incorporate the history of national holidays into my classroom curriculum, but especially Veterans Day. I have always held a special place in my heart for veterans since my grandfather. Well, technical difficulties, sorry about that. Since my grandfather, Ralph Lemon Sr., served in the Navy during World War II. Becoming a history teacher, I knew that I had the platform to honor his memory and sacrifices in serving his country, but also had the opportunity to honor all of those brave individuals who chose in the same similar calling, some of which who are sitting on stage with me today. That first year in my classroom, I had an idea of inviting a veteran to speak about their military service into my room. Since it was a little short notice, a family friend from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania graciously agreed to FaceTime with my students and explain his experiences during the Vietnam War. But since he could not make it out here physically, we FaceTimed with him. Even though he had previously made plans that year, we had that face-to-face interaction via FaceTime. But I'm happy to announce that he is with us here on this stage today, Mr. Tom Ford. I hosted a similar panel to the one you're going to see today. Unfortunately, COVID-19 upended the normalcy of our lives, including gathering in large groups. Therefore, we were unable to continue these assemblies over the past few years. However, due to the overwhelming interest and positive feedback from the assembly in 2019, I decided to ask for permission from administration to host it again this year, and graciously, they approved it. That said, today you will meet a veteran from each branch of the military and from each major conflict in American history, spanning from World War II to the current situation in the Middle East. I am honored to introduce each of these veterans to you who have not only made sacrifices so that each of us can enjoy our freedoms today, but have also volunteered their entire day to share their experiences with all of you, and they deserve every ounce of our respect. So without further ado, representing World War II and the Navy, Signalman Clyde Leary. And Air Force Sergeant Paul Steitner. Representing the Vietnam War in the Army, Sergeant Tom Ford. Representing the Coast Guard, Chief Petty Officer Don Edwards. Representing Desert Storm Era in the Marines, Corporal Bill Bowser. Representing Pre- and Post 9/11 and the Air Force, Staff Sergeant James Craddy. And representing Middle Eastern Conflict, Command Sergeant Major Barry Donahue. Begin with Signalman 3rd Class Clyde Leary, who was born and raised in Freeport, Pennsylvania. Clyde enlisted in the Navy at the age of 17 in 1944 as he felt inclined to help with the war effort. The Air Force was his first choice, but there were underlying circumstances that prevented him from enlisting in that branch. As a result, he completed his basic training at the Naval Amphibious Base in Little Creek, Virginia, and the Great Lakes Training Facility in Chicago, Illinois, where he was eventually assigned to the USS LSM 331. He soon found himself traveling down the Mississippi River to New Orleans, Louisiana, through the Panama Canal and off to the Pacific Ocean. His main locations during World War II were in the Asiatic Pacific Theater, but by September of 1945, when the war was ending, Signalman Leary found himself in Tokyo Bay, Japan. With that, I will let him tell you the rest.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to wing it. I haven't rehearsed because I think I know the story. But anyhow, when I was 10 years of age, I was walking to school with a friend. And back in those days, there wasn't any television, very little radio, and everything was newspaper. And as I was walking to school, a kid was coming the other way with a paper bag filled with papers, hollering, "Extra, extra, read all about it. Japan bombs Pearl Harbor." And I looked at this friend of mine, and he looked at me, and we said, "Where's Pearl Harbor?" We went to school, and we found out where Pearl Harbor was. 7 years later, I was in Pearl Harbor. But anyhow, I went to join the Air Force and was colorblind. And I finally got into the Navy. I got to Great Lakes Naval Training Station. They give you another test. And every time you go somewhere in the service, they give you a physical. And I cheated before to get to that particular point by listening to the person ahead of me say 6381. And I said 6381 on a colorblind test, and he said, "Good." So anyhow, I get to Great Lakes. I thought I gotta learn these numbers. I'm practicing it on the way up. When I get to the guy, he turned a page. So I was lost. He put a check mark on color blindness, and I thought, uh-oh, I'm gonna be one of those service people that tells the guy pumping water that the bucket's full. So I was walking through from one room to another, and there was a pencil with an eraser on it, and I took it and erased the check mark. I ended up being a signalman with colored flags in the Navy. But we won the war. Anyhow, from Great Lakes, went to the amphibious in Little Creek, Virginia, learned how to steer a ship and so forth, which I'd already known. I was born on the Allegheny River. But anyhow, I was a helmsman and a signalman. We picked up a ship in Chicago, went down the Mississippi River, ended up in New Orleans, out into the ocean, down to the Panama Canal, through the Panama Canal. As we went through the Panama Canal, you have a pilot on board, and he tells you what to do, but they have donkeys on both sides. They call them donkeys, but they're diesel engines, and they hold you in the middle of the dams or the locks as you're going through the Panama Canal. Get to the Pacific Ocean, get to Pearl Harbor. First thing I looked up my two brothers who were there. One was a deep sea diver and the other one was a heavy equipment operator in the Navy. And I saw them, not at the same time, but I saw them. Plus a lot of other people from Freeport was at that Pearl Harbor. But anyhow, we shipped from there then to the different islands of the Solomon Islands, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Guam. There's hundreds and hundreds of islands in the South Pacific. Some are still underwater. The only time you see them is when low tide. But anyhow, ended up in the Philippines and picked up the 82nd Airborne Division to take to Japan, and they were getting ready to bomb Pearl Harbor, and after they bombed it, well, then we were ready in the Tokyo Bay to take the 82nd Airborne Division into Pearl Harbor to occupy Tokyo, Hiroshima, and excuse me. The 82nd Airborne Division took over, and of course they weren't very nice to their own service people. They would sell something to somebody and take it off on them on the next corner. we didn't know any different, but we thought we were the white hats, but we had our own enemies at times. But anyhow, the 82nd Airborne Division was wonderful. While we were there, we were in Tokyo Bay, and I didn't know that the Missouri was there, anchored there. We were, I don't know, 2 or 3 football fields away from the Missouri, and I was on watch, and I got a set of binoculars there, and I watched MacArthur and everybody signing the peace treaty on the battleship Missouri. At 17, I didn't have a camera. Nobody had cameras then. So anyhow, I witnessed that, and I still remember it. That's a good thing I got a memory. But anyhow, it was very, very nice to see that. Aboard ship, we had 4 hours on and 4 hours off on steering the ship, and besides doing signal duty. You see the flags down on the front of the stage here. Those are the different flags. Every one of them has a letter from A to Z. And whenever we would get a message from, when we stopped into a port, the captain would get a letter, and he wasn't allowed to open it until we got about 3 miles out to sea. He'd open it and it would say where we were to go, and then we were the lead ship, so we would have to get those flags and put them up on the staff and tell all the boats behind us, the ships, sorry about that, not boats, the ships behind us, where we were going, and it was quite a job of putting all those flags up. Now that's daytime. In the daytime we use semaphore flags, which they all mean something by A, B, C, D, so forth, where you're talking back and forth. Maybe you people in the audience, if you ever go to Pittsburgh and see the submarine down there, the Requiem, and you'll see flags on it. When you get down there, you'll be able to read those flags. It says Requiem on the flags. It spells it out. So you see them letters on the down here from A to Z. Everything is coded because you can't use radio. The Japanese would pick up the signals, so we had to use flags. We had to use blinker lights at night because you couldn't see the flags. And of course we had radar on the ship to find out where the other ships were in the convoy with us or any enemy ships. But I was never in any battles. We took troops ashore, dropped them off, and then went back out, picked up more troops, took them in, dropped them off, and then that was our job. Our ship only took 3 feet of draft in the bow, 6 feet in the aft, which let us get to the shore and get up on the shore a little bit with a ramp down, and then the soldiers and equipment would get off onto the island, and we'd go back out again. They never bombed any LSMs. I guess it was a waste of bombs because there wasn't enough men on it. They weren't big enough. They were after aircraft carriers. So we were very lucky. Anyhow, I spent 2 years overseas, and coming back, we stopped at different islands to go around the islands with a speaker, with a Japanese interpreter, telling the Japanese that the war was over. They were still in caves. They would come out at night, steal food, and then go back into caves again. And they were in there, I'd heard that they were in there after a year, still in caves. But I think they're all out now. Anyhow, got back to Pearl Harbor. We had a a monkey that we had to get rid of because we weren't allowed to bring it into the States. We had a dog, we had to get rid of it and give it to another ship. And when I got back, well, then I started contracting. And you probably remember the name Bob King here at Knoch. Bob worked for me at Freeport Park, building the pool, building the lobby hall, and in fact, I built everything at Freeport Park. My crew, I had 13 guys. Probably one of my best remembrance of all my travels was connected to Freeport Park. So that's about it. And I'm 96 and a half. Still going. I quit skiing last year. Not on account of the slopes. There was 35 steps up to my condo, and it was getting too much for the steps. So that's it. I'd like to tell you, future citizens of America, get involved in your community and be the mayor of Saxonburg someday and do something in Butler County and in Pennsylvania and in the United States, and get involved and we need help. The country's in bad shape. we need some young, good, smart kids, and they're right out there in the audience right now. So don't quit school, and if you do quit school, join the service. That's it.
Good morning, guys.
So our next veteran is Sergeant Paul Steitner, who was born and raised in Butler, PA. In 1950, Sergeant Steitner enlisted in the Air Force after graduating from Butler High School. At just 18 years old, he decided to enlist in the Air Force for the sole purpose of avoiding becoming drafted into the Army. After completing just 5 weeks of basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, Sergeant Steitner went to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado. His main job in the military was working as a mechanic for remote-controlled gun turrets on B-29 bombers. He spent most of his time in Okinawa, Japan, at Kadena Air Force Base while serving in the Air Force from 1950 to 1953, but I'll let him tell you more about his experiences in the Korean War.
Thank you. I think I should start with my career in the Air Force as butler. And the reason for that is that's where I joined the Air Force. And probably a lot of you, especially servicemen, would know or would have heard the name A.B. Abraham. A.B. was the recruiting sergeant in Butler when I joined. And A.B. used to recruit everyone, whether it was Air Force, Navy, Army, Marines, or whatever. But I'm sure there's some servicemen here. If you were to go out to the Veterans Administration building at Butler, you'll see a name across the top of that. It's A.B. Abraham. A.B. was a friend of mine, became a good friend, and the reason why I talked about it is he's the guy that got me into the Air Force in the first place. So anything that happened after that, I can blame on him. But anyhow, A.B., if you knew his history, he was in the war and was stationed in most of his career in the Philippines. And there, he became a prisoner of war with the Japanese, and he was in the Death March. If you've ever heard of that in the history of the Second World War. He was quite a guy. He was funny because sometimes you couldn't understand what he said. He talked pretty fast, you know, and we always called him a character, but he was a great guy. But anyhow, to start me off, that was the guy that got me started, right from Butler County, and recording sergeant was originally from Butler County. So he was back here after serving overseas in the Philippines and so on. Anyhow, my career started in 1950. I graduated from Butler High School in 1950, June, and I enlisted in the Air Force in November of 1950. I went to Pittsburgh for my physical, and I got a physical there, and I was sworn in Pittsburgh, and the lieutenant or whatever he was wanted me to leave for Lackland right away, and I said, sir, I can't go to Lackland. I mean, I'm down here, and I'm not dressed to go, and I have some business to take care of. And he said, well, you can't go. You're in the Air Force now. I was a boat craft. I can go. I asked him nicely, and he said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do, Paul. I'll give you 1 day furlough. So I said, well, I'll take it because I have some business I want to take care of. So I did. I came back up home. The next day, I got my business taken care of. I had to be back in Pittsburgh at 6 that evening in order to catch a flight to Texas. Got on the airplane in Pittsburgh, and that airplane was up and down at least 3 times in Ohio, once in Michigan, and I can't remember all the rest. But it took us a day and a half to get to Texas because we were up and down, and what they were doing was filling up the airplane with recruits. I found that out later. After getting to Lackland, they gave me a physical and about 3 or 4 shots in the arm, if I recall correctly. And they used to call where we went into to take these shots in the crazy house. And it was a little bit crazy. Anyhow, at that time, before that time at Lackland, the basic training was either 16 months or 16 weeks or 10 weeks. Since it was getting close to Christmas, I got my basic training in 5 weeks. And I got my first furlough because it was Christmas. They gave me 10 days, and I had to come back. When I came back, it wasn't to Lackland. I had to go to Denver, Colorado, where I began my training. I was at the old Lowry Air Force Base in Denver. This is where I went to school. I was there for 6 months for my training, and it was a fun time, you know. The school lasted 6 hours a day, and they had 3 classes. One in the morning from 6 o'clock in the morning till 12 noon, and the other from 12 noon to 6 in the afternoon, and the other from 6 to 12 at midnight. Luckily, I got the one from 12 noon until 6 in the afternoon. We went to school 6 days a week, and our off time, they had other things for us to do. I can remember a staff sergeant that was in charge of our group. He'd say, you guys are going to go out and do this, and if you don't do it, shame on you. shame we got extra work. But anyhow, after being at Lowry, I graduated from the school there, and I got my orders, and I could have went a number of places, but it ended up that I had to go to the Far East, and I didn't know where that was at. So anyhow, I went out to California, and I was there about nearly a month before I got orders to get aboard a ship and leave for the Far East. So eventually that time came, and I did leave for the Far East. I didn't know where the devil I was going, but I wasn't sure where the Far East was. But anyhow, the day came that the boat came into a harbor, and I didn't know where I was at. So the truck out there, and you have to go out there with everything that you own in a bag, and jump on the truck and go wherever it takes you. So I said to the fellow driving the truck, "Where the heck are we?" And he says, "You're at Okinawa." I said, "Well, where's Okinawa at?" Well, he said, "I don't know, but it's here." And so anyhow, I got on the truck, and they took me to Kadena Air Force Base, which is kind of in the middle of Okinawa. I learned that, and so when I got to the base, I didn't know where I was supposed to be. I mean, I'm there with a bunch of folks standing in an area at the base, and then finally they come out and they say, "Well, we'll take you to your barracks." And so got in the truck again, and I went to what was going to be our barracks. And what it was an old Army building that they had used for repairing trucks. And there was about 60 of us fellows that lived in that. And you know, being in the Air Force, I thought it was supposed to be pretty nice, you know, sheets and plates and all that good stuff. And anyhow, I went to the building, and there that's where I slept and showered and so forth and so on. But it was easy for me, you know. You had to make your own bed. You had to shine your shoes. You had to sweep around the area and so forth. That wasn't bad because I hired a houseboy, and he used to come in every day and do whatever's needed to do. And it didn't cost me much money. It cost me $2, which was, the houseboy didn't want $2. He wanted 2 cartons of cigarettes. So that's the way we paid these fellows off on. Incidentally, my houseboy was an ex-Japanese soldier that had been in Okinawa and stayed here apparently. But anyhow, I got the cigarettes for them, and I knew what they were going to do with them. They were going to take them out and sell them for it cost me $1 a carton. That's a pretty good price, isn't it? $1 a carton for a carton of cigarettes. But anyhow, I gave them to him, and they were going to, I'm sure he sold them on the black market. But anyhow, I was assigned to the 19th group, the 28th Bomb Squadron at Okinawa. That group had come up from Clark Field. Clark Field is in the Philippines. And they told the fellows that came up from the Philippines that, well, we'll be up there maybe a couple months, and we'll bomb the dough out of North Korea, and it'll all be over. Well, when I got there, they'd already been there between 5 or 6 months, and they were still flying when I left there. We used B-29s, and the B-29s were the largest and the heaviest aircraft propeller-driven aircraft that was used in World War II, and they were left over, for the fellows that were in the Korean War, like me, and they weren't the greatest aircraft, because we always said what happened at that time. We got the junk that was left over from World War II to use in the Korean War. But anyhow, we used it, and we flew missions up to Korea and carried in our Bombay 20 500-pound bombs. They were the type of thing that was normally used over there. Occasionally we had others, 100-pound bombs, and different types of bombs for fire and so forth. I did that for a while because they had a shortage of fellows to load bombs and take care of the bombing electrical parts that are in the aircraft, starting with the bombardiers in the front of the aircraft. I'm going to say a little bit about a B-29. They had 5 turrets on it and carried 12 50-caliber machine guns. I was a remote control turret guy that fixed up and kept them going, the turrets. But you didn't sit in the turret. They were remotely controlled. The sights were one place, and the turrets were another. And like I said, there was 5 of those. At the front of the aircraft, the bombardier had a sight, and at the waist, there were 2 scanners, one on each side. And then we had what we call a CFC gunner that sat on a chair in the middle of the aircraft, looking through a bubble on the top of the aircraft. And it was a chair that would go 360 degrees, so he could follow an aircraft and come again and go the whole way around. And keep shooting, because we had a device on the turret that would stop the guns from shooting when it went through the tail of the aircraft. Then we had a gunner in the tail. And again, it was we took care of these remote control turrets. And